Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been enjoying the series, would definitely appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, like our videos, and always love to hear your comments down below and engage with the viewers of this series. We are at the start of the 2027 to 2028 offseason. After a bit of a disappointing regular season, only 88 wins, although we did win the AL Central Division, was a fantastic postseason for the Royals, who just concluded a World Series victory, sweeping the Atlanta Braves 4-0. So we have finally reached the pinnacle with this team, and now we are going to prepare for a very busy offseason. Right now, our salary situation is incredibly tight, with only about $500,000 for free agents and no money for extensions. But we are expecting, after a very profitable season, when we're going to make close to $20 million, that hopefully ownership will increase our budget once again. Hopefully, we'll be around $200 million of budget for next season, which should open up about another $8 million or so for player payroll. Importantly, though, in the coming days, we're likely to decline a $25 million team option on Trevor Story, who came in and played a few months for us, contributed to the World Series championship. But when we look at Trevor Story for $25 million next year versus our young second baseman Ricardo Cabrera, there's really not much of a difference. You look at the batting ratings in Trevor Story, clearly still has more power, particularly home run power at this point in his career. But the youngster Cabrera is already a better contact hitter, better at avoiding strikeouts. And when we start looking at some of the defensive ratings, I think they're equal, or Cabrera's a little better. So for about $24 million a year less, certainly going to give the youngster, who will soon be turning 23, Ricardo Cabrera, the opportunity to play second base for us next year. Julio Rodriguez, like Trevor Story, was a player we added for the playoff push, coming off a World Series MVP award. He's looking for close to $36 million a year. I think it's extremely unlikely that we will be able to sign him. Obviously, that would be a massive contract for the Royals. But he is going to be only 27 years old next year. Excellent contact hitter, really good power, solid defensive right fielder. If there's ever a free agent that the Royals would, potentially pay for, it's probably a 27-year-old right in their prime rather than someone who's in their early 30s. I don't think there's any way that we're actually going to be able to swing that, but I'm not closing the door completely. As I said, we're going to open up $25 million when we let go of Trevor Story, and we do have a lot of arbitration eligible players, some of which we could trade away if we needed to open up more money. I'd put it under 5% chance that we actually make an offer to and bring back Rodriguez, but like I said, I'm still thinking whether there might be a way to do it. Nicky Lopez is short. We've got a team option for $12 million. He has been kind of a cornerstone at this team for all 6 years. Going to turn 33 next season. Still a very good defensive shortstop, a fan favorite. Given that our team is built on pitching right now, I am considering exercising that option for $12 million. I think it's probably a little higher than he's really worth. But if I look at the potential free agents at shortstop, there's just nothing out there defensively. Nico Horner, our former second baseman who we traded away, not as good a defensive shortstop, and he was looking for close to $20 million before we traded him away. Luis Guillorme, again, not as good defensively as Nicky Lopez is, and also probably not quite as good a hitter, although neither one of them has a huge bat. And then kind of looking at pure shortstops, Miguel Rojas is close defensively to where Nicky Lopez is, but, in probably also a similar-ish type of bat. but he's going to be turning 39 next year. I just don't know. I mean, I think he'd be relatively reasonable, but he's not as good defensively. So given that our team is so focused on pitching, and we've been strong up the middle with Melendez at catcher, Horner at second, Nicky Lopez at third, and Kyle Lewis at center for so long. We're already going to be downgrading a little bit at second base, moving on to Ricardo Cabrera from, not just Trevor Story, but also Nico Horner. We're going to be moving on from Kyle Lewis in center field in all likelihood. So I'm inclined to keep at least our shortstop as strong defensively as possible for another year, which is leaning towards me bringing Lopez back. So that said, if we still clear out the $25 million from Trevor Story, that's going to put our total payroll down to about $121 million pre-arbitration. So if we do get a good boost in our finances, the player payroll could be up over $140 million, which would give us around $20 million to potentially play with. Obviously, that in and of itself is not enough to potentially sign Julio Rodriguez. So we would have to kind of trade away some arbitration eligible players. The most prominent that we may be looking to get rid of is actually Hayden Wisniewski, who has been a real important pitcher for us for the last 6 years. You can see a pretty regular starter for us, typically our fifth starter, or typically someone who's only starting when we have some injuries. But he's been a pretty valuable pitcher for us over the years. The issue is he's going to be making, about $6.3 million next year, given that with Trevor Rogers coming back from injury, and then Spencer Bauer, Ryan Lagerwell, Ricky Benasco, and the recently acquired Zach Williman, he's kind of a swing starter, long reliever for us, and $6.3 million seems a lot for a reliever. So we may be looking to move on from him. Looking at Williman is going to be making about $1.5 million less than Wisniewski this year, still is an option year ahead of him. And I think he's a more dominant potential pitcher than Wisniewski is. So as far as right-handers making that kind of money for a fifth starter, I'd rather go with Williman for a little less. So if we move on from Wisniewski, that opens up another $6 million, and then things can start getting a little interesting. We've got a decision to make with MJ Melendez. We've got a decision to make with American League batting champ Sal Frelick. And then we've also got a decision to make with Peyton Williams. Certainly we'll have him back. And then the most important is a decision with our closer, Austin Roberts, who's in line for about $9 million this upcoming offseason. He has been a fantastic pitcher over the course of his career at this point. As you can see, over 3.5 seasons has put up a 2.04 ERA, 55 FIP minus, 205 ERA plus. Led the league in games, in saves twice in his career already, a 3-time All-Star already, and a 2-time reliever of the year. The issue is, $9 million for someone who's going to be pitching 65, 75, maybe 80, 85, 90 innings seems pretty expensive, as dominant as he is. So we could potentially move on from Austin Roberts. And if we moved on from Roberts at $9 million, and Wisniewski at about $6 million, as well as Trevor Story with $25 million, then we are getting to the position where we could just about afford Julio Rodriguez. I don't know that we want to be giving anyone a 9-year contract as the Royals, especially at $35, $36 million a year. And although I'm convinced that we probably should move on from Wisniewski, because $6.3 million is a lot of money for the Royals to have wrapped up in a backup utility starter, swing starter, long reliever, especially when we still have Mackenzie Gore, who is more than capable of stepping into the rotation if we have any injuries. I don't know, whether letting Austin Roberts go is the right decision, or we try to get another year out of him. But if we do move on from Roberts and Wisniewski, that gives us the option to at least think about bringing Julio Rodriguez back. The other option, and we don't even need to move on from Austin Roberts to do this, but I think if we move on from Wisniewski and we move on from Julio Rodriguez, then we will have an option thinking about the guys near the end of their arbitration years in terms of an MJ Melendez or a Zach Williman, or even, a Sal Frelick or a Austin Roberts or a Peyton Williams have more arbitration years left. If we move on from Wisniewski and Story, we're going to have enough money that we could front load a contract to one or two of those guys. Maybe, for example, give somebody like Frelick $15 million for this upcoming season, and then a little bit less over the next, 4 or 5 years, maybe buy out a couple years of free agency. So I think that with the money that we free up as we head into the beginning of this offseason, there's two potential options to do with that money. I don't think there's anyone too exciting coming up in free agency. I've obviously looked at this already myself, but we'll share that information with all of you. Rodriguez, clearly the best player out there, and then you look at a lot of the rest. Arenado, Devin Williams, Sandy Alcantara, Nick Anderson, Zach Eflin, Jack Flaherty, JT Ginn, who's on our team right now, Nico Horner, who we've moved on from, Clayton Kershaw, who we actually did have for a year in the past. Generally older players, kind of on the way down. Several of them are fragile as far as their injury proclivities, some of them even wrecked in the case of Sixto Sanchez. So I don't think there's any free agents, with the possible exception of Rodriguez, that we want to invest a ton of money in. So because of that, if we do clear up some salary space, my thought, at least here on October 21st, is that if we've got money to spend and we don't use it on Rodriguez, we try to front load a contract or two to whoever we think our most attractive arbitration eligible players are, and maybe lock up, a couple key players on the team out towards 2031, 2032 to get a little bit of certainty as far as what our finances are going to look like in those out years. And we are now to the off season. Mentioned that we need to make a decision on Nicky Lopez. We are going to execute that $12 million option. Want to keep our defense strong. Trevor Story, we are going to void his last contract year, make him a free agent. Review of season goals from owner Isaiah Moore. Obviously, we won the World Series. He's talking about erecting a statue of us in front of Kauffman Stadium. He's still upset that we didn't upgrade at first base. Happy that we made his profit target, and given that we met the long-term goal of winning the series, he's delighted with us. He still wants to see more from the team, though. And our goal for next year is to win a championship, upgrade at first base, and then win a championship in the next 5 years. So let's see exactly how that's articulated in the owner goals. Now he wants us to win the championship again by 2029, build a long-term championship team by 2032, and then upgrade at first base next year. So we won the World Series championship a couple days ago, and he's already asking for more. So let's see what he does as far as our new budget. $202 million. So he did give us a $10 million bump for expenses, allowing us to payroll around $140 million, which is what we were hoping. So from that perspective, we are going to have some flexibility this offseason. Pitching coach John Habian retired, so that will be a hole that we need to fill. And then trainer Dave Greshner, who we signed to a 1-year contract last offseason, is also gone. You'll remember we thought Greshner was fine, but not a great team trainer, so we were totally fine with just signing him for 1 year and then going back into free agency this offseason to see who's available. So going to need to find a pitching coach and a trainer. Alex Vasquez is the 6th ranked prospect in baseball. Coming off a single A season, hit just .263 with no home runs when he moved up to single A after a dominant .338 in a small amount of time in rookie ball. Just turned 21 years old. You can see he still looks like he has the potential to become an excellent hitter, but going to have to start developing a bit to meet that full potential, given that he's already 21 years old. Arbitration is obviously beginning, and a couple of posted players from the Korean Baseball League, neither of whom looks particularly exciting to us. So you can see, moving on from Trevor Story has opened up some money for us. We've got some other decisions to make. We can obviously also, as we usually do at this point, we'll cut down our scouting budget a little bit, as well as our development budget a little bit. If we have enough money, we'd like to kind of get those back up to the levels we had in 2027, but just want to give ourselves as much financial flexibility as possible as we begin the offseason. Player development down to the 15th ranked minor league system. Not optimal there. Would like to be a little better than that, given all the money we've been dumping into player development at this point, but it is what it is. Did get a nice bump in fan interest. It looks like we got a 10-point bump from winning the World Series, which is good, particularly because if we do lose Rodriguez and some other key players this season, this offseason, we'll certainly take a hit on that front. Did raise our ticket price a bit in the second half of last season to $22, given the bump in fan interest. Going to tentatively head into next season with a $22.50 ticket price, and see how we do in terms of starting to hopefully get over 16,000 season tickets, even with a higher price than we had last year. Thinking about the team, I do think we are going to try to start shopping Hayden Wisniewski. One thing we're going to do to kind of offset that a bit, Chris Bubic, longtime Royal, who we traded away a couple seasons ago and then brought back, is a free agent now. He's only looking for about $1.6 million a year. I think that, for that swing starter, long reliever role, Wisniewski, Gore, and potentially Bubic all can fit that role for us. We don't need a ton of players filling that role. So Bubic at $1.6 million in addition to Gore, I think that would definitely allow us, if we can sign Chris Bubic, to move on from Wisniewski and see what we can get for him in trade, rather than spending around $6 million a year for him to be a long reliever and spot starter for us. And we're going to see if, as always, we can get Bubic for somewhat less than he's looking for. He's looking for an average of 1.6 over 3 years. We're going to see if he'll go for an average of 1.35 million over 3 years, and he's willing to at least think about it. So see if maybe we can get Bubic signed up. Also going to start taking a look at all of our salary arbitration eligible players, and thinking about whether there's anything to do with them. Looking at our pending free agents with potential compensation, I don't think there's anyone we can possibly make a $18.9 million qualifying offer to. I think Kyle Lewis would accept that, and I don't want to be paying him $18.9 million a year. I like Nick Anderson, Aaron Ashby, and JT Ginn, but we're going to kind of move on from all three of them as far as our bullpen. Reese Mcguire, I think we are going to try to make an offer to. Currently making $2.3 million. He is a very good defensive catcher to back up MJ Melendez. We do in AAA right now have a pretty good candidate in Fernando Caldera. Not quite as good defensively as Mcguire, and an acceptable bat for a catcher, but he still has 2 option years left. So I think I'd like to kind of have him spend most of this coming year in AAA, and I think he would be a fantastic insurance policy for us in the event that either Mcguire or Melendez gets hurt. But I'm going to try to see if we can bring Reese Mcguire back at a decent contract for one final season with the team. Looking for 1 year at $2.32 million, so he's looking for a little bit of a raise. Let's see if he's willing to take only 2.1, which would be less than he made last year. Not quite ready to go there. How about 2.15 million? Not ready for that. 2.2 million. Probably going to start making him angry soon. Yeah, he's really sold on getting a small raise. 2.25 million, Reese. All right, we'll pay you what we paid you last season. And I have kind of looked. There's no Mcguire is the best defensive catcher that's going to be a free agent this year, so we're inclined to try to want to bring him back, and looks like he will consider that $2.3 million for 1 year as our backup catcher. So we'll see what happens on that front. Looking at pending free agents without compensation, we've already made the offer to Bubic. Not going to make an offer to Alex Reyes. Trevor Story we're going to move on from. And then Julio Rodriguez, assuming he's still looking for something in the mid-30s. Yeah, still that $35.6 million. I don't think we're going to be able to swing that even if we move on from Wisniewski, but we're going to kind of go through our arbitration-eligible players right now and kind of put a strategy together to see how much money we may be able to potentially free up. I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to do enough to be able to make a run at Rodriguez, but if there's ever, as I talked about, if there's ever a free agent Kansas City should go after, it's a 27-year-old, rather than someone in their early 30s. And starting to dig into our arbitration-eligible players, Spencer Bauer, who we think is got a good chance of winning the Cy Young Award in the AL this year, 27-year-old. Only looking at making $5.5 million this coming season, but it's very conceivable that his salary is going to be increasing very significantly. Expected to be about $9 million next year, and then over $12 million in 2030. Clearly, if he wins the Cy Young Award, would likely make those numbers even higher going forward. He is willing to sign an extension with us, 10 years, average of $23 million a year, but those numbers are just going to be rough for us to commit to a player. Close to $27 million a year for his early to mid to almost late-ish 30s. For a player who's already fragile seems like a pretty big commitment. So as much as I'd love to lock him up for the long term, I just think it's an incredibly risky contract for the Royals to even think about doing that, unfortunately. So we are going to try to maybe get him locked up for 5 years. I don't think he'll go for the type of money that we're going to offer, but it looks like 12-1, 21-4, 21-9. So he's going to make about $27 million over the next 3 years. So $9 million a year for the next 3 years, plus potentially buying out a couple of arbitration seasons. We'll see if we can come up with something along those lines that's a shorter contract. I don't think he's going to go for it, and I think we're probably going to end up just trying to lock him up for 1 year, but we'll at least give it a shot to buy out the rest of his arbitration and a couple of free agent years, and then have him hitting free agency again in his early 30s rather than locking him up until he's 37 years old. All right, I've kind of put together a 5-year proposal for Spencer Bauer that would buy out his 3 last arbitration years, as well as 1 year free agency and then a player option for that 5th year. So essentially it's a $62 million contract over 5 years, way less than what he's looking for without as long a commitment. Pretty sure he's not going to accept it. And he's clearly not. He needs significantly more money. So we are just going to see if we can get him signed for this one upcoming season. His arbitration number is about $5.5 million. See if we can maybe get him signed for $5 million just for 1 year. He's looking for 6. Let's see if we can get him for $5.3 million. Ooh, he's really not happy. Hopefully we can get him locked up. Actually, we'll just give him the 5.5. He is an important player to us. Sounds reasonable. All right, so hopefully we'll get Spencer Bauer locked up for at least 1 more year. Willing to make a 5-year commitment to him in his late 20s, even with his fragile status, but a 9 or 10-year contract is not something we're thinking about doing. Moving on to Zach Williman, he's also looking for about 5.5. He's really not looking for a longer extension. Let's see if maybe we can get him for 5.2 this upcoming season. Not quite. He's coming off a win in the clinching game of the World Series. 5.3 million would happily bring him back for that amount. We'll work through a couple of these less expensive players too before making the real interesting decisions with Wisniewski, Roberts, Melendez, and even DeCenzo, Willems, and Frelick. All right, so we've kind of handled the easy stuff. We made one-year offers to R.J. Dabovich, Mackenzie Gore, Scott Kobos, and Stephen Paulini. We're going to see what Wisniewski's looking for. $8 million a year. His arbitration number is 6.3. He's not talking long-term. He has been a useful player for us, but we are going to shop him around and see what we can potentially pull together rather than paying him $6 million a year next season to be a long reliever. Let's see if we can extract a little bit of value from him in the trade market. And honestly, there's not much of any interest in Hayden Wisniewski, looking for prospects, and nobody really exciting at all, which I think, makes our point that spending $6 to $8 million on him in his final arbitration year doesn't make a lot of sense. Tyler Heckert from the A's system looks like the most interesting player to us. Primarily simply because he's got 3 years of minor league options yet left. He's a below-average hitter, okay fielder, could play second, maybe third, could play shortstop in a real pinch. He's got a little speed, could potentially use him to, as a pinch runner or something, but there's just not a lot exciting out there. But at this point, the goal is just to get something rather than paying Wisniewski $6.5 million next year to pitch 80 innings for us most likely. And we were able to get the A's to put in another $1.3 million in addition to picking up Heckert for Wisniewski. So we are going to go ahead and make that trade. Wisniewski has had a nice career with the Royals. You can see parts of 6 seasons since we picked him up. He's actually been a pretty regular starter for us through that time period, starting 162 of his 193 games, 3.92 ERA, which has been good for a 107 ERA plus and a 100 FIP minus. So he has been, perhaps a slightly above average pitcher for us over the years, but given the depth of our rotation and the fact that we have Gore and hopefully soon Bubic, who could slide into the rotation out of long relief roles. And then we still have Tyler Bosma and Zach Jacobs in AAA, who have the potential to be starters also. I just don't think it's worth spending that money on Wisniewski. So we are going to go ahead and say goodbye to Hayden. Thank you for 6 years with the Royals, including the championship this past season. Fans not happy that we have moved on from Wisniewski. Looking at our front office, took a 1-point ding to fan interest, but you can see that has opened up some additional money for us to play with, whether we decide to potentially make a run at trying to keep Rodriguez, or we just use the money we freed up from Wisniewski to maybe try to lock up a Roberts, Melendez, DeCenzo, Williams, and or Frelick to a bit of a front-loaded contract that buys out some of their free agent years. Moving on from Wisniewski, I think, gives us the flexibility to do one of those two options. And with about 24 to 25 million to spend as we think about salary arbitration, the question is whether we're going to move on from Austin Roberts, looking to make about $9 million next year. I don't think we're going to move on from MJ Melendez. Need him behind the plate. Has been over the course of his career an above-average offensive player. Good defensive catcher, really good arm, captain personality, great personality for the clubhouse. I don't think we move on from Melendez, but if we decide to move on from Roberts and we can add $9 million to the $24 million or so that we have available right now, that would be what would allow us to chase after Julio Rodriguez if we decide that's the way to go. So I think the most important thing to figure out is what Mr. Roberts is looking for. And right now he's just looking for a 1-year extension. So that's interesting to know. Zach DeCenzo, I think, is an easy one. I don't know that we want to make a long-term commitment to him. Hasn't proven that he can hit for average at the major league level. He does certainly have power, but his WRC pluses have been, in the below average to slightly above average range. Do like that he can play second and third in addition to first, and I guess you could play him at first base if you had to, but not really looking to make a long-term commitment to him. Let's see if he's willing to sign for $1.2 million next year. That's an acceptable offer, so we'll try to get DeCenzo locked up while we still think about what we want to do with Roberts, Melendez, Williams, and Frelick. I love Peyton Williams. Obviously hard not to love somebody who's hit 27, and 49 homers in his first 3 years in the majors. But he doesn't have a position to play defensively. He's already 27 years old. I don't know that we want to make a long-term commitment to him. I'm going to see if maybe we can get him signed just for next year at 4.7-ish. It's close to what he's looking for. All right, 4.8. There we go. All right, so we'll try to get Peyton Williams signed also, and that leaves us with Roberts, Melendez, and Frelick. And you can see that I keep kind of kicking the can, but now the decision-making is at the critical point because if we decide to move on from Roberts and trade him away, I guess let's just see what, if anything, is even available for Roberts. I would think that there would have to be pretty interesting prospects for a great player like him. Yeah, there's some interesting people out there. Oh, we can get Salvador Perez back in his giant contract. I don't know how interesting that actually is, but we can definitely get something interesting. Luis Baez, this left fielder, he's not a bad bat. Only 24 years old, finally got up into the majors. Did only hit 245 in 163 at-bats in AAA this year, but certainly profiles that he could be a useful major league hitter eventually. Catcher Antonio Gomez. Good defensively, really awesome arm, kind of an average-ish type hitter, but certainly a useful player to have in a system. So there are options if we decide to trade away Roberts and try to bring back Rodriguez. But the other option with the amount of money we have available now is obviously to see if we could sign some combination of Roberts, Melendez, and Frelick to front-loaded contracts, use up that money that we could potentially have chasing Julio Rodriguez on these guys, and kind of lock up some cornerstones of our franchise for the next several seasons. Frelick is an interesting player. Love to have a decent bat in the corner outfield, and he definitely provides that. High work ethic. All he's done in 2 years with the Royals is lead the league in steals 1 year, tied with his teammate Bobby Whitt Jr., and then he won a batting title this year for us. So he has been a really productive player for us, and clearly moving on from Lewis and potentially Rodriguez could obviously use as much help in the outfield as possible. And his salary demands are not crazy. Willing to sign an 8-year deal at an average of $10.7 million a year. I don't love the fact that he's fragile, but he has been a pretty good hitter at the major league level between his time with Milwaukee and his time with us. now has close to 2,000 major league at-bats, and he's put up an 802 OPS, 121 OPS plus, 121 WRC plus, 150 stolen bases. Not a great power hitter, but, some gap power. I definitely would think about signing Frelick to a longer-term contract, especially if we can do it at a little more reasonable amount than he's looking for. And then turning to our buddy MJ Melendez. He's also willing to sign a longer-term contract, 5 years, average annual salary of $14 million a year. So I think that's actually more reasonable than he was looking for the last time we talked to him. He is not a great catcher, but as we've talked about, plus offensive profile, plus defensively, fantastic personality. Over the course of his career, 2,300 at-bats, has put up a 117 OPS plus, 116 WRC plus. If a player like him hits the open market with that personality, that catcher ability, that arm, and a slightly above average batting profile, he's a pretty valuable player. So I think I'm going to try to lock up Melendez and Frelick to longer term type deals, and then see what the financial situation looks like. Probably means that we won't be going for Julio Rodriguez. Probably kind of spreading out the risk more than putting it all in one person. But I think that both Melendez and Frelick could be important players for this team for the next several seasons. All right, MJ Melendez was looking for 5 years at an average of $14 million. We are offering him the 5 years, but an average of $12 million. A bit front-loaded with $14 million this upcoming season, and then a little bit of insurance for us with just a $10 million contract and a team option for his age 33 season in case he drops off the face of the earth in terms of his production or major injuries or anything like that. $12 million a year for a player like him to buy out his final year of arbitration and 4 free agency years, I think is a good deal for the Royals. Let's see what he thinks about it. He's looking for a little more. Only wants to do 3 years at this point. We'll see if we can figure something out. So we offered him $12 million a year over 5 years. He countered with $13.86 million a year over 3 years. We're coming back to him with an average of $13 million a year over 4 years, and we'll boost his MVP option and his All-Star option a little bit. I don't think that'll make a huge difference, but let's see what he thinks about that. Yeah, he still wants to do 3 years. Hey, if we can buy out 2 years of him, 29, 30, and 31-year-old years, and then we'll revisit it 3 years down the line, I think that's still something for us to think about. We're still going back and forth with Melendez here. He's now looking for $13.67 million a year over 3 years. The average that we're offering him now is $13.25 million over 4 years. And he's willing to think about that. Slightly front-loaded with 16 this coming year, then down to 13, 12, and 12. So trying to do what we can to spend some of the money that we have available now and still lock up a solid player for 3 years of free agency. So we will see what happens with Melendez. Honestly, putting this somewhat front-loaded contract out there probably means that Julio Rodriguez is off the table for us, which is fine. I thought that was a pretty remote possibility anyways. Now the question is whether we can maybe get a Frelick signed to a similar contract to Melendez that's a little bit front-loaded. So that is potentially what we're going to work on next. All right, Frelick was looking for an 8-year extension at about $10.7 million a year. We probably need to offer him a little more. Right now we are at 8 years, but only averaging $9 million a year, a bit front-loaded. If we kick this first year up to 14 million at some point, the ownership may not like how front loaded that is, but right now we're at 9.25 million a year for 8 years. Let's just see what he thinks of that. He's come down to about 10.6, so he's willing to move in our direction, but we probably got to come back with something close to $10 million a year in average annual value to make it work out on his end. All right, Frelick is looking for $10.56 million a year for 8 years. We are coming back with an 8-year contract that averages $10 million a year. It's 13 in the first year, followed by 5 years at 9, and then 2 team options at $11 million in its age 34 and 35 seasons. We've added in a $500,000 MVP bonus and a $100,000 All-Star bonus. I think this should put us in the right neighborhood, but let's see. And he's willing to think about it, so that would be interesting. It would give us a lot of optionality. You can see getting, the biggish number out of the way this coming year, then definitely a manageable number, and then when he's in his mid-30s, if he's still a real productive player, $11 million is good value, and if not, it lets us get out. So I like it. We'll see what happens. 8 years, $80 million offer to Frelick. So clearly we are moving on from the dream of Julio Rodriguez, but also moving on from that big Trevor Story option and trading away Hayden Wisniewski has opened up some money so that we can hopefully get Frelick and Melendez signed to these potential front-loaded contracts. And then the issue is whether we would want to try to do something similar with Austin Roberts. It would have to be severely front-loaded, though. We'd have to be putting every penny we could into this coming season because as good a reliever he is, I don't think the Royals can afford to have, $12 million on the books for several years for a player like him. So we'll see how some of these other arbitration deals kind of work out over the next couple of weeks before we decide what to do with Roberts specifically. We've got till November 13th. It's only October 23rd, so there's a lot of time for us to see what happens with all of these other contracts that we put out there at this point. And starting to hear back from some of the contract offers that we made. Stephen Paulini signed his deal. We also made a number of minor league offers. Sal Frelick signed that extension. Fans are pleased with that. Scott Kovos with the extension. Zach DeCenzo, Reese Mcguire, Jonah Heim, a minor league deal. Chris Bubich back, Williman back, Melendez back with a big one, and the fans are pleased to have Melendez back. Davovich, Peyton Williams, Spencer Bauer. The fans excited about Spencer Bauer coming back, so that's positive. Signed Ken Crenshaw to a team trainer contract. Similar to the guy we had last year, he's not all that exciting. There just wasn't a lot out there, so I think we're kind of in the year-to-year phase with trainer contracts until we can find someone we're really excited about. And then I got Josh Kroger to sign a contract for one of our minor league teams. So in the arbitration situation, that leaves us waiting to hear from Mackenzie Gore at this point, and down to not a ton of money for extensions available, which is kind of fine. So obviously we are out of the Julio Rodriguez sweepstakes, but I feel pretty good that we've locked both Melendez and Frelick up to longer-term contracts with the team. Gives us some certainty, and you can see in the case of Frelick, going to make a lot of money in this coming year in 2028, and then pretty reasonable till we get to the team options. Melendez, generally a similar pattern, a real big number this coming year, and then much more reasonable till we get to a team option. So front-loaded those a little bit to use up some of the money we have now. You can see fan interest up to an 80 now with some of those re-signings, most notably Trevor Bauer. So the early stages of the offseason seem to be going pretty well so far for these Royals. And we've now got Mackenzie Gore signed too. We signed pitching coach Robert Pavlik to be our pitching coach in Double-A. He's outstanding teaching pitching, excellent with development, and outstanding with mechanics. The reason we did that is that we did promote Brian Conger from Double-A to become our pitching coach at the major league level. He's excellent at teaching pitching, good with development, mechanics, and aging. So like the good with aging for someone at the major league level, and also has a good personality to fit in very well with the rest of the staff. You can see we have no potential conflicts at all at this point. A lot of people that get along well, great coaching of our teaching roles, and staff cohesion is remains really high. So still have a pretty good coaching staff ahead of us. Obviously the newcomers, Ken Crenshaw and Brian Conger, are the only ones that don't have good relationships with the players right now, but hopefully those can develop over some time with the guys in our major league system. So that leaves us with Gore signed. Just need to figure out what we want to do with Austin Roberts. We've got money to front load a contract for him a little bit. The issue is that he's expecting to make about 9 this year, then 13, and then close to 17. So he expects to make about $39 million over these next 3 years, and then is probably a 15+ million type pitcher in free agency. So I don't know that we're going to be able to structure something to work. And I also, as I've talked about in the past, not sure how much the Royals should really be paying for a closer. Now, given that we are moving on from Rodriguez, certainly want to bring him back for next year. I think my big question with Roberts is whether I would be interested in making an offer to bring him back for more than just a single season right now. And Roberts is only looking for this upcoming season. I think I am going to try to see if we can structure something for 4 or 5 years, buy out a year of free agency, front loaded a lot this year, and then pay him a more reasonable amount going forward. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get something done, just because I don't want to be paying an average of 13, 14, 15 million a year for a closer. I just don't think that's a wise decision for most teams. If you're the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Dodgers, you can probably pull it off. A team with our type of financial situation, I just don't think that's a good use of the dollars. Pretty confident that Roberts won't go for this deal we put in front of him. He's just looking for 1 year in arbitration. We're offering him a 5-year deal, averaging $10 million a year, but front loaded with 14 for this upcoming season, and then just 9 a year for the 4 seasons after that, which would take us through his 3 arbitration years and then 2 years of free agency. I think there's about 0 chance that he'll accept this, but I don't know that I'm willing to go much more than that for him at this point. And he's not looking for a long-term deal right now, so we'll see if we can just get him locked up for this upcoming season at maybe $8.7 million a year, and he's willing to think about that. So we've got Roberts locked up for at least 1 more season. Eventually he may get too expensive for us, but we did see that there's a lot of interest in him if we decide to move on from him. So pretty confident that we're not going to get ourselves into a situation with him where we can't get good value if we need to trade him away at some point. And while we're waiting to hear back from Austin Roberts on that contract, we're also heading into award season. A couple of gold gloves. Zach DeCenzo, our first baseman, not the greatest offensive player in the world, but did win a gold glove in his first year as our full-time first baseman. So given the fact that he did also hit 22 homers with a .229 average, we'll look at that as a small upgrade from Nick Pratto. And then Bobby Whitt Jr. Won a gold glove for the 3rd time in his career, and that marks his 3rd consecutive gold glove for us at third base. So although he's not making the All-Star team as frequently as he was, he is now a world champion, a divisional series MVP, And he also, in addition to his Rookie of the Year, now has 3 Gold Glove awards. So good to see a little bit of hardware for Bobby Whitt Jr. As we've talked about, I think we have a pretty decent chance of also picking up a Cy Young Award for Mr. Spencer Bauer in the coming days. And Austin Roberts did sign the 1-year deal. The fans are excited about it, so that is positive. Silver Slugger Award winners announced, and probably not a surprise, Julio Rodriguez for the combined season with the Mariners and the Royals, 33 homers, 107 runs batted in, and a league-leading 43 steals between the two teams, wins a Silver Slugger Award for the Kansas City Royals. And with the acquisition of Austin Roberts, that will push our fan interest up to an 82. It's good that we have moved it up. We got the 10 points for winning the World Series, and we're another 6 higher with some of the signings we've made. Because clearly when we get into free agency and we start losing people like Julio Rodriguez and Trevor Story and even potentially Anderson, Ashby, Ginn, and Lewis, fans won't be thrilled about that. So at least we've given ourselves a little bit of a cushion in terms of our fan interest with some of those moves that we've made. And another day, another award for the Royals. Manager Byron Nichols winning Manager of the Year for the second straight season, actually. So a nice trophy case for Byron Nichols. Won Manager of the Year and won the division each of the last 2 seasons with Kansas City, and of course won the World Series this past year. So a big day for Byron Nichols, and now we are going to sim ahead to tomorrow and find out whether we will have back-to-back Cy Young Award winners or not for the Royals. And Bauer got the award. So tough race. He beat out Jurangelo Clinche from the Chicago White Sox, as well as Garrett Crochet from the White Sox. And this is amazing. Mackenzie Gore, who was not even on our playoff roster for the World Series. We had so much depth. He did do a nice job for us, splitting time between starting and relieving. 5-5 record, 2.45 ERA. And we have re-signed him for the next 3 seasons, but he somehow got 6 first-place votes and finished 4th in the AL Cy Young Award voting. Also, Zach Williman, who we brought over in the trade from the Red Sox, and Ricky Vanasco, the young starter, got votes for the Royals. But Spencer Bauer is the AL Cy Young Award winner. Add some hardware. As we've talked about a lot, 12-10, led the league in games started, 212 Ks in 175 innings, 3.14 ERA. And the best FIP minus and pitcher WAR in the American League. So a well-deserved Cy Young Award for Spencer Bauer to match with his first All-Star Award, as well as a World Series championship this year. So when hopefully Trevor Rogers is all healed up, we will have hopefully the last 2 American League Cy Young Award winners heading our rotation in the 2028 season. And looking at some of the other big awards as we get here towards the end of the award season, Pablo Lopez, unanimous Cy Young Award winner for the Padres in the NL, 18-8 record with a league best 223 innings, 2.46 ERA, fewest walks per 9, most strikeouts, the highest strikeout to walk ratio, and a 5.1 pitcher WAR. So not surprising to see Lopez win the NL Cy Young Award. Fernando Tatis Jr., unanimous winner of the NL MVP, also for the Padres. Wow, look at that season. 69 homers, 165 driven in. He has led the league in homers and ribbies at least 3 straight years. Wow, he is having an incredible career. Let's look at those stats in a little more depth. And he has led the National League in home runs 6 of the past 7 seasons, led the National League in ribbies 4 of the last 5 seasons, led the NL in runs 3 of the last 5. Has led in OPS 4 of the last 5 years. Just a brilliant career. He's not even yet 29 years old, and he's got over 400 homers and over 1,000 runs batted in. So with a career 300 batting average. So Fernando Tatis Jr. is having an exceptional career there. Looking at the American League, Adley Rutschman from the Orioles, the catcher, with a really nice year. He's obviously good defensively, and 39 homers, 114 ribbies, 1.072 OPS, 186 WRC plus, and a 9.7 WAR. Not a shock to see a catcher who puts up those kind of numbers winning the Most Valuable Player award. Looking at the Royals, Julio Rodriguez finished 6th in the voting, and we also had Peyton Williams, coming off of his 49 home run season, get some votes also for the American League MVP award. So award season is over. Second consecutive Manager of the Year, second consecutive Cy Young Award winner, got a Silver Slugger, a couple of Gold Gloves. So some good hardware for the Royals during this award season. Obviously, being the World Series champions is the most important. Don't have anybody eligible for arbitration at this point. We've signed everyone except Wisniewski, who we traded away. Also signed backup catcher Reese Mcguire, and pitcher Chris Bubich, 2 extensions to prevent them from becoming free agents. Everybody else is kind of too expensive, kind of out of our price range, or, in the case of a lot of these relievers, kind of out of our price range, but we also want to open up some spots to bring in some of our talented AAA pitchers and give them an opportunity to pitch a little bit at the major league level and see exactly what we have with some of those. As I mentioned, Tyler Bosma and Zach Jacobs, the 2 most prominent among them, but there are other pitchers down in AAA who are well deserving of a chance to perform at the major league level with the Royals at this point. And we've made it to free agency. Not a shocker that Julio Rodriguez highlights the list of potential free agents. Rosny Contreras, Spencer Torkelson, Brian Reynolds, Noran Arenado, Sandy Alcantara, Jack Flaherty, Lucas Giolito, Clayton Kershaw, and Nico Horner also on the list. So Rodriguez was with us at the end of last season. Horner was with us at the beginning of last season. And Clayton Kershaw has played for us in the past also. So few former Royals among the top 10 free agents out there. With about $16 million to spend, we are probably not going to be an active participant for any of those top free agents, but we will have a little bit of money to add somebody if we so desire. Did also notice that, if I could pull up my mail, that real interesting international free agent, Shitong Kin out of Taiwan, only 22 years old, and looks like a absolutely monster, potentially batting profile, and potential to be just exceptional, and already a decent major league hitter, durable, only looking for $6 million a year. Could absolutely play second, could play third if we needed, could play short if we needed. 6'3", could become a first baseman, quite honestly, but real good work ethic. This is a real interesting player. I think that we've got Bobby Whitt Jr. back at third base. We accepted the team option on Nicky Lopez, so he will be back at short. Planning on turning second base over to Ricardo Cabrera. And then right now we have Jose Barrero as a utility infielder, and then Zach DeCenzo and Peyton Williams kind of as first base or DH kind of players for us. But the batting profile of Shitong Kin here is certainly very interesting. OSA ratings also have him pretty highly regarded, but I could see us making a play for Mr. Kinn, given that he's only looking for $6 million a year, because he looks like he could be a difference maker for us for years to come. I don't think that he's definitely not a shortstop with that 59 range. Excellent second baseman. Not great to see him at third base with that arm. He's not really an outfielder. You could put him in left or right if you needed. He could definitely play first base, but very intrigued by him. But we will kind of decide whether we want to make an offer for Mr. Kinn, as well as whether we want to make an offer for any of the other prominent free agents in our next episode, highlighted, of course, by Mr. Rodriguez, who we are moving on from. But we do have money to get involved if we need to, so could be an interesting offseason for these Royals as we try to build a roster that hopefully allows us to remain competitive and make a run at back-to-back titles in 2028. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.